All right, let's welcome to the Misfit Nation, Emily Johnson, author of Bird of Paradise, coming to us from North Carolina. How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Very good. It's great to have you on the show. I'm glad we're able to connect and try to get your story out here to the audience on the Misfit Nation and those
Yeah,
beyond
definitely.
there.
Oh, yes, far beyond, all over the world.
So if you don't mind, if you'd like to tell a little bit about your backstory and as far back as you want to go to up to the point where you started writing a book or why you became a writer at this time.
Sure. Well, I was born in Colorado and loved to golf, ski, anything outdoors. And when I was 13, we moved to Pinehurst, North Carolina. And shortly after we moved to Pinehurst, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer and later on ovarian cancer. And so growing up throughout my childhood, never really knowing if my mom was going to be there from year to year or if this doctor's appointment was going to be that doctor's appointment where we'd have the news that, there was nothing more that could be done, was certainly an eye-opening experience as a child. It forced me to grow up very quickly. But aside from that, I played competitive golf all through high school. I attended UNC-Chapel Hill, so go Tar Heels. And I was a graduate of the journalism school there, specifically in public relations. And so upon graduating from college, I went down to Florida to work for the PGA Tour, which was not a huge leap for somebody like me who played golf all the time. And I worked in their marketing department and business development department for several years. And then my mom got sick again. And so I decided to move back up to North Carolina. And that's how I've ended up in Raleigh. I worked for a professional ballet company, grant writing, for a while, and then ended up kind of going out on my own as a marketing and advertising consultant. I freelance now, which is absolutely wonderful. I have a 7-year-old, so it makes a lot of difference when I can control my own time. And that's kind of very generic all about me. I'm sure I'm missing a lot, but
It'll come to you as we talk, as we go further into our chat. I'm sure you say, the light bulb will go on. So I forgot to say this, and it'll pop up, and you'll wind up back somewhere in the other part of the story. So, I mean, you got the diagnosis of your mom when you were still young, before you became the legend of UNC Chapel Hill there, playing golf and for the Tar Heels. I'm a Duke fan, so I can't.
I'll
Don't want to go crazy here.
It's not NC State, so we're okay.
Okay, we're sort of good. We're not all the way in the triangle of death down there, so it's good. And I mean, that had to be like way heavy on your heart and soul, especially as a young girl, and then going up through college, and then knowing you were going to go away work for the PGA, which is probably a dream gig as a golfer to go work for the PGA, and then get the bad news again and have to move back. How did you deal with all that?
I still remember the day that I was told my mom had breast cancer. I remember where I was, what I was wearing, exactly the conversation that we had. And my only question when they told me was, are you going to die? Because that's what's going to come up in your mind. I'm an only child, so I had that on my shoulders as well. And my parents were wonderful in that they really never excluded me from anything. They didn't tell me too many details to make me worry unnecessarily. But when something did happen and there was news, they never hid it from me. They kind of treated me as if I was an adult, which I think kind of brought me along because I never had that. I'm wondering what's really going on, or are they telling me the truth? A couple years after she was diagnosed with breast cancer, she had another reoccurrence, not of breast cancer, but of ovarian cancer. And my mom was BRCA gene positive. So it wasn't out of the ordinary to be dealing with something like this for her. And that ovarian cancer is the one that came back, I think a total of 8 times.
Wow.
She was given, they told her, get your affairs in order. This is not something at stage 4. It's not something that you survive with for very long. And she, I'm not going to use the 4-letter words that she used, but she was just like, no way, I'm not going to do this. Cancer's not going to beat me. And she told her doctors, you sure as heck better make sure I'm at my daughter's wedding. And I will accept nothing less. And she went through so many surgeries, just huge 6-7 hour surgeries. And 24 hours after being on the operating table, she'd be in the hospital room quizzing me for my final exams in college as I paced back and forth because all of her surgeries were at UNC medical facilities. So it was right there on campus. And we kind of became famous for that. She was a teacher. And so she really, it didn't matter. She could be, who knows what she was on at that point, that close to surgery. And She wanted to make sure I did not have an issue with my exams and that I was going to get my stuff done and my life wasn't going to be interrupted. And that was who she was. She's just an amazingly strong woman. And you can hear me talk in the past tense. She passed away Christmas of 2012. So it was about a 17-year battle with stage 4 cancer, but she did live to see me get married. So she made her goal. She's missed out on her grandson, but I know she's still looking down at us.
She does sound like an amazing person, and definitely very resilient and strong-minded. And
yes.
And I bet she's passed that down to you, and you're able to pass that down to your child as well through stories about her, and keep her memory alive through your child as well.
I hope so. I mean, her legacy, really, one of the things, apart from being resilient, I mean, she was incredibly stubborn. She wasn't going to do anything unless she wanted to do it. And I still will always believe that she went out on her own terms. She got, it all happened very quickly at the end, right over Christmas. But it was one of those things where she ended up on life support, and my dad and I were going to have to make that very difficult decision on whether or not to take her off life support. And she just did it herself without us even having to make that decision. And I know it sounds weird, but in my mind, she knew what she was doing. I mean, she didn't want us to have that guilt and wonder what if we had waited. And she just, she was always the first to reach out to other patients that were, whether they were getting chemotherapy together or she met them in the hospital. How are you doing? Here's more information. My mom probably knew more than the doctors did. She just researched because she was not going to take a diagnosis, that, oh, that's done, it's a death sentence. She was going to fight all of it, and she did. And she was not afraid to pass on any of the information to other people that were having similar situations to her. And it's just, she taught me how to be selfless, how to advocate for my health. I am very closely watched, way more so than someone my age needs to be, simply because of her history, and I am not going to take anything for granted. She taught me how to advocate for my health, and that's, I think, one of her biggest legacies, because if I can stop this here, and I can pass on her experience to other women that may, not catch it and things like that, and it can inspire them to go and get tested and things. She's done her job. I know she'd love to know that.
She definitely has, and now, thanks to technological advances in medicine, detection's a little better. I don't think it's 100% better than it was back then. I mean, it was a 17-year battle ending in 2012, so there was a long time in between there when the technology there was, if you didn't have a pain or something and didn't go, you would never find out.
Exactly.
And now people can look at you and say, "Oh, I think something might be wrong with your left eye a little bit, and you need to go to a doctor." "What? Something's wrong with my eye? I got to go." And you go there and they find out something. And it's just weird like that, because people research everything now. And like your mom kind of started that in the early internet days, probably. And she was probably using big books in the house, big medical journals, saying, "No, this ain't right. You're not saying the right words to me."
Well, and they wouldn't have caught the ovarian cancer unless she hadn't been the one that had gone in and said something is wrong. And they're all like, "Oh, well, some of the doctors kind of just said, oh, well, this is from the breast cancer," or things like that, or they didn't really take it seriously. And then, she said, "That's it. Something's wrong. I'm going to do something about it." And it's turned out to be stage 4 ovarian cancer. And, I unfortunately, I mean, the doctors are fabulous. Her doctor saved her life so many times. And her main doctor was even at my wedding. Which was really, that's the one that she said, "You better make sure I'm there to see my daughter get married." And then he was there with us.
Oh, wow.
Which was really special to me. 2 of her doctors, actually, her radiologist was there as well.
Wow.
So, but they were wonderful. But it's just one of those things. I think back then, really, it wasn't patient-driven medicine, and now I think it's starting to change, where the patient is taking more of a step in a role in their health. Which is really important.
And I think that's a big thing with medicine now, because now it's not just a guessing game as much as it used to be. Because when a patient realizes something's wrong, they monitor themselves a lot more now. And like you have a lot of checks now based off what your mom went through, knowing that you might be at risk as well. So you're way ahead of the curve of what might happen, and you're not going to let that happen to you or to your child as well as you move forward. So that your child doesn't have to go through it at 7 years old.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my biggest fears, is that my son's going to have to go through what I did. And I came out okay on the other end, but gosh, was there some times where it was just, heartbreaking and so difficult, when you're in the prime of your coming of age moment, wondering if your mother is going to be there or not for your senior prom and for college graduation and high school graduation, and never knowing from day to day what was going to happen. And you learn to live with it. It's a new normal. It's always in the back of your mind, but you learn to go on. And my mom never wanted me to dwell on it. She was a woman that lived her life with passion. So she made sure that we created wonderful family memories and never wanted it to be the center of our lives, because she didn't want it to win. And that's kind of how she went through everything, which is how I've kind of learned to do things as well. I screw up sometimes.
we all do. It's just learning to admit that we screw up is the hard part. That comes with that stubborn part of life and everything.
Right.
The hard-headedness that we all have, and no matter how much you say you don't have it, we all have it deep down inside the back of the head somewhere. It's not my fault. It's someone else's fault, or I didn't do that. There's no way I messed this up. But so your mom actually started this book, The Bird of Paradise, and you picked up the reins and finished it. How was that transition for you?
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, she started writing it not long after she got diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was her way to escape from things. She wrote for hours outside, and it was where she could escape into a world where cancer didn't exist. It was also a way of putting into writing her legacy. A lot of things that she wanted to tell me and make sure I knew as her daughter that she didn't know if she'd be around to tell me. So she put it into this book through the story. It starts out kind of as a coming of age family saga, and there's so much of my mom and my family in this book that nobody would really know unless they knew us. But it is, in a sense, it's a letter to me. And she spent years writing it. She passed away when I was 30, and shortly afterward, I found a letter from her with a copy of the manuscript. No one had ever read it. She had never let any of us read it, but a copy of what she had, and a request in the letter that asked if I'd finish the story for her.
Wow.
So after a lot of tears, I sat down and I read it, and I loved it. I had no idea that she could come up with that. I mean, she was a teacher, an incredibly intelligent woman, but it was one of those things like, wow, you really wrote this. That's great. And then there was a lot of, remembering through it, because she talked about places that we had been as a family, and it starts in 1967, and the main character is 17 years old living in San Francisco. My mom was 17 in 1967 living in San Francisco. So there's a lot of, just historical things that she wanted to leave for me in that. Trying to come in at that black and white point where she left off was pretty difficult at first. I've never written a fictional book before. I come from a background of marketing and advertising. So you don't describe things, you just get the facts out there and you get them out as quickly as possible. Press release is one page. You don't have a lot of room for description. And so I really wanted to meld my style to hers, because this was her book. I wasn't going to change it up. I wanted it to be true to her. So it was very difficult for me to get into that mindset of, no, this is not advertising and marketing. This is a story. And she did an incredible amount of research into the places that this book takes place. And so I had to do that as well, but I had to do it having never lived through that time period.
Right.
So that was really difficult. I mean, there's a lot of places that this book goes that I've been to personally, but not back then. So, I had to call museums and do a lot of research and hope I got it right various times. And then I had to go back into what she wrote and made sure that where I took the story, because she left no notes. Make sure that where I took the story made sense to where she started the story. So I had to add in things to where she had written, add in conversations, add in events, things like that would make the obvious and logical trek to where the story ends. So it's really, to this day, nobody knows where I started and she left off, and I'll never tell anybody. My publisher doesn't know still.
Wow,
So I've had a lot of people try and guess, but they haven't guessed correctly yet. So
that's a good
I know,
sign.
well, I may have let the cat out of the bag to one person, a very good friend of mine. But and that was my goal. I didn't want anybody to know that, to know that. So I had to keep it that way. Um, and I'd say overall it's about a 50-50 collaboration, but I hope that I took it where she'd want me to. I like to think I did.
I'm sure you did. If no one can figure out where the line crossed between her and you, or the blurry area where that gray area where her hand stopped writing and yours started, that's a great thing that you were able to do, is keep it going without a hint of what happened right there,
Yeah.
who started and who stopped when. I mean,
And it
you
was
have a degree in journalism. I know you were professionally in the marketing area, but did the journalism degree help you at all with the writing?
I think it did, because writing is writing. Whatever type of writing you do, there is sentence structure, and there is kind of you're writing 101, but then you have to go in two different directions for fictional and non-fictional writing. But as long as you have that foundation, I think it does help. It kind of that you have to get from point A to point B. You just have to be a little more descriptive on how you get there in fictional writing. But I think anybody can write. I don't think you have to have a background in writing. I think it's one of those amazing things that anybody can do if they want to do it. And there's so little of that. And it's, if somebody wants to write, just pick it up and do it. It's incredible. It was therapy for me. I picked this up right after she passed away.
Wow.
And so it was a lot of getting to keep on that conversation with my mother. It took me 8 years to finish it. Granted, I had a baby, and that took away a lot of my time that I could sit at my computer and write. But part of me never wanted to finish it. A small part of me was very sad when I finished it, because I kind of felt like that conversation with my mom was coming to an end.
And I would close the
But
door in that chapter.
yeah, and so it's still kind of hard for me. I never intended to publish it. This was just going to be my personal therapy. And then somebody read it and suggested, why don't you try and get this published? And I thought a little bit about it and did some research. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time with a publisher. And, you just, one thing led to another, and all of a sudden it's published.
Wow.
It's been crazy. And it was released on her 71st birthday. So.
Oh, wow. So all these milestones for you.
Yes, lots of milestones. And I'm immensely proud of it, not because I'm all trying to puff up my writing skills, but just the fact that this was something that I could do with my mother. And I can leave it for my son too, which
Definitely.
is really neat, because I carried through her idea of the little life lessons without overbearing or being, stodgy about it and things, but just the little things that I want to make sure my son knows that's my job as his mother to carry on. And so I was able to do that throughout the story as well for him.
That's a great thing. And we just talked about how being in the right place at the right time is how you got published. How did it feel when you got told, yeah, we're going to take this and we're going to publish it? And how would you tell a young author that's like on the fence right now with their manuscript? What would you tell them to do to get theirs out there?
Well, I mean, when I found out that I was going to get it published, my initial reaction was joy, and then a ton of tears, because it was very emotional for me, simply because my mom had always dreamed about being published. So I felt like I have achieved her dream for her. And so it was a very emotional experience for me on that. But for any author that's never published before, I would say go with it. I mean, just do your research, find a publisher, don't be, everybody is going to get turned down when you query, your manuscript. And it's not necessarily that you're not good at writing or you don't have the good story. It just might be wrong time, or wrong person that you're querying it to, or the publishing company. And never give up, because anybody, I think, has the ability to be a published author if they believe in themselves. And it's not, I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of people out there that have been trying and trying and trying, but it really takes belief that you are good enough. And that comes out of your writing, it comes out of, when you write your query letter, and never giving up. I've seen so many writers between Twitter, that you follow in the writing community, they get so disappointed when they get told no over and over again. And then all of a sudden they get a yes. But had they given up right away, you would have never known.
Right. And so you're not judged by how many times you get knocked down. It's that one time you get back up and you keep getting up and you fight and you get that yes.
Exactly.
And that wall comes down and the sun comes up and your book is on the shelf at Barnes and Noble or Amazon or wherever at this time.
I still can't believe it. I mean, I am the last person in the world that ever thought I'd have a published book. So
that's just another gift from mom there to push you to a new height, a new
Yep.
thing, and a new journey for you. So now you got Bird of Paradise out there. Have you thought about writing either a sequel to it or a different genre book altogether?
I do have an idea for a second book. Whether or not it actually gets out of my head and onto the computer is a whole, different story. I've tried several times to start it, and it's just not. It sounds so much better in my head than what it's coming out when I type. And so I think I've got some writer's block when it comes to that. But I do have an idea with a story that's going to be connected to Bird of Paradise. And it just has to get there. So I don't, I love reading all genre of book. I don't think I have what it takes to be a fantasy writer. I don't know enough about it. I enjoy reading it, but I can't come up with something as brilliant as some of these other writers do. It just doesn't form in my head.
Right.
So I think, and I think that's important for any writer, to really learn to write what you love and what speaks to you, not what you think people want. Because that'll come across in your writing, and it will also drive you crazy if you're writing something that's just not right for your personal, who you are.
Definitely. And once the idea is in your head and you want to chase it down and get it on the computer, you have to have the proper structure of writing it. And like you're saying, as you write it, it just doesn't feel right as it's coming out. So you just start over.
Yep.
What are the most important elements of writing that will help keep that thing going instead of having to start over?
Well, I mean, it's probably, and it's not even an element of writing. It's just a mindset. Don't be afraid to walk away for a little bit. I finished Bird of Paradise relatively quickly for what it is. But it was just kind of the first layer. And then I went back and I had to add layer upon layer upon layer, almost like paint, to come up with something that was a book. And I had to walk away several times to it. And I think it's something that a lot of writers can probably relate to, is at some point you have to know when to stop. That's probably, I could still be writing this, and it's been published since last March. And just because you're never, as a writer, at least for me, I was never 100% satisfied, but I had to learn to pull myself away from it personally and look at it from outside of, these characters were my babies. I mean, they were my family for a long time, and it's very hard to look at it objectively. But I think, it's just get it all out there first. Don't be concerned about where it goes or what it sounds like, or if you're using the right descriptive word here or there. Just get it out kind of as a flat layer, and then you can start doing your wordsmithing and doing your word choice and decide which direction to develop the characters. Basically, just get started. I need to take my own advice.
So get that idea out of your head and start typing again. No, I've had one that since online my first deployment, I started writing one that was in 2003. And it's like you've done. I had the idea, I write and I stop, I write and I stop, I write and stop. So there's many portions of it. The first page has been written like 75 times. But going past that first page, I keep changing my idea of what I'm going to do. So it changes the whole thing again and change it. So now I'm up to 30 pages now. So I haven't stopped now. I keep going. It's going to happen. I know I'm going to finish this book and it's going to be amazing. I'll be happy it's done. If it don't get published by someone else, I'll just do it myself and get it out there just so it's out there, just so the story's told.
Well, that's something that's so incredible about what they do nowadays, is that you can be a self-published author. And that used to be, at first you went from the top 5 publishing companies, which, unless you had a ton of money to pay an agent, you weren't going to get into. I mean, it was very rare. And then they had, they started scaling down to some of the smaller publishers. And now that they have the self-publishing option, I think it opens the world up to so many incredible stories that people wouldn't have been able to get out there otherwise. I love reading self-published and indie authors. I mean, it's almost all that I read, with the exception of what I'm reading right now, I admit. But it's something, and it's not just because I want to support other, authors that don't have the means to put behind the big companies, but really because I just love the stories. I think you get so much passion for people when this has become their project. They're not trying to write it for a check. They're trying to write it for themselves. And that's exciting to me.
And to kind of get their story out there, or if it's a self-help book, to get that help, that stuff they believe will help someone else just out there. If it helps one person, they're excited. It may not help the New York Times bestseller list, but that one kid that picks it up and says, this will be good for me as I leave high school. It'd be great.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I went into this with the goal that I'd sell one book to someone that wasn't a family member. And I did. And so to me, this was a success. I mean, maybe it'll never go anywhere from where it is. I mean, the reception to it has been absolutely incredible to me. What's been more amazing is the people that have reached out to tell me about the stories of having parents with cancer and how they dealt with it, and how they've just found out about their mom being diagnosed, or they've just lost a parent. And that has been something that I never even considered. And so it's brought a lot back to me, but I also am able, 10 years from that, having had to go through that, I'm able to see the other side of it. And so it's been, I've gotten to know some of these people very, very well, and I talk to them and chat online, and it's been kind of exciting for me to be able to kind of feel like I'm giving back a little bit.
Right. And you went through, I mean, you had 17 years of going through from diagnosis till when your mom finally, she ended on her own for you. It was at the doctor's office. And so that's a wild roller coaster for you from the age you were to when it happened, when she finally passed. So when these people express that they're just found out or their loved one just died, what advice do you give them to, I guess, go through that roller coaster?
I mean, it's one of the things that I always hated hearing from people after it happened to me was, it's going to be okay. Nobody knows what to say. I mean, I've had it happen to friends who've just lost parents, and even though I went through it, I still don't know what to say. But it's not going to be okay, but it's going to be different. And you'll never be over losing a parent. And that's something that I think people need to realize right away. They always hear about the stages of grief, and that at some point you get to accept it and you go on, and it's okay to grieve on your own schedule. It's okay not to be okay about it. Other people are going to grieve in different ways. So if you've got brothers, sisters, father or mother and things like that, and they grieve differently than you do, it's not because they don't care. It's not because they don't miss the person. It's just everybody has to be okay with doing it their own way. Looking back on it, for me, I had a friend that lost a parent, and she asked me, does it ever get better? And it becomes it becomes something you learn to live your life with. You get to that point where you had all these sad memories, and you can't stop thinking about the last few days when you watch the hospital and things like that. But then you get to a point where you're out, where you can start looking at the positive memories again, and start realizing the gift that they left you, and focus on that, and focus on their memory on a happier note. So really, I guess that's a long way of saying my advice is that just let it go wherever you need it to go. It's not something that we all can go through the same way.
Right. There's no two of us are the same. And
there's times now, 10 years out, where something will happen, or there'll be something on TV that makes me laugh, or my son will cough, and I wonder if he's needs to go to the hospital, and all I want to do is pick up the phone and talk to my mom. Right. She would be who I would ask. Not having her here, certainly I think a lot of parents and mothers can understand that when you have a kid, all of a sudden a whole new level of anxiety hits your life, when you're like, oh, they bumped into a wall. Do I rush to the hospital? And not having my mother for that, it's been very difficult. So there's still times where I will pick up the phone ready to call my mom, and then I'll be like, oh, wait a minute, I can't. So I've learned to talk to her. Anyone that hears me probably thinks I'm going insane. But that's how I've learned to grieve. I've learned to, basically still keep her in my life, make sure her legacy is still here, make sure my son knows who his grandma was. And, I still think back on, the what would mom do is kind of where I am at this point. But so many people think, oh, well, I should be over it by now. And it's not going to happen that way. It just gets different. It gets to the point where you can live with it, but it's still going to hit you out of the blue sometimes. And I don't mean to sound like, a Debbie Downer, but it's true. I wish more people knew that that's how grief went, that it doesn't hit everyone the same. My mom had an amazing opportunity to prepare me for it over many, many years. She and I, like I said earlier, they were always very open and honest with me, and I felt like I could be the same. So she and I had long, long discussions about, the fact that she may not be here and what she hoped for me and how she hoped, things would go. And if this happens, I don't want you doing this. I want you, to take care of your dad, and you guys, stay with each other and take care of each other and things. And I got the chance to say goodbye. The last thing I ever said to my mom was, I love you. And she said, I love you back. And then she was put on life support. So, that's an amazing, I almost got closure before I had to have closure.
Right.
And I think that helped a little bit.
I'm sure it did. And like you mentioned, you had 17 years of waiting for that moment when you found out that it's gonna be over. And it still doesn't make it easier. It doesn't make it easier that day that you actually find out it's over. And we're all on this blueprint, like you said, that, oh, you get a 2-week grieving period. Most jobs give you 5 days of bereavement. 5 days is nothing to get everything settled or even get your mind settled. You're still in shock in those 5 days to try to figure out what you're supposed to do next. What do I do with my hands now? What do I do? How do I get all these affairs taken care of? What do I do with all this stuff? And you and your dad had to go through all that together. Then you had to go back to life.
Yeah.
Still live
Well,
at that point.
and it's, part of that, what do I do now? Having to get all the affairs in order and handle all that. That's almost a blessing because it focuses you on something other than what the emotional part of things. You become very, robotic for those first few weeks afterward of just, here's my list of everything I have to do and call the banks and things like that. And then it's after everybody leaves and it's after everybody goes back to their own lives where all of a sudden you sit down and think, oh my God, she's really gone. And that's when it hit my dad and I almost at the exact same time. So I basically stayed down in Pinehurst for probably close to 4 weeks afterward. And then tearing myself away and coming back to work and trying to get my life going back again. That was very difficult as well. And I just had to learn just to not be so hard on myself.
And like we both have said, you just gotta ride the waves of emotion as they come to you with the grieving process. I'm sure our doctor will tell me I'm wrong, but there's no real blueprint to grieving. You can't do it in order. There's no check marks. Oh, I've done that one already. I can't go back to that one. It's going to happen again. You're going to keep going through it.
Yes. And you're going to, 2 steps forward, 1 step back as you feel like you're healing through it. But you will get there eventually. It's so hard to get there, but I hate that, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I really don't like that phrase, but I do feel, having gone through what I've gone through, obviously I'd prefer it never to have happened, but I do feel a lot stronger coming out on the other side, that I can face a lot of things that I would have never been able to face beforehand. Not that I want to,
Right.
But it does give you, and I think that's almost a little bit of a gift of the whole thing.
Right.
You have to start looking for the good.
You got to find the good, find the light of every day, find that light that makes you kind of happy or makes you smile at least once a day.
Yep.
So Emily, thank you for sharing your story with us. It's very strong and it shows resilience and it shows your strength. And you shared your book with us. Where can people get your book if they want to buy it?
It's available on Amazon under Bird of Paradise, or you can search my name. Emily Hughes Johnson is the way, and Marilyn and Hughes are the authors. I had to make that connection between the Hugheses. So,
Okay.
And it's available exclusively on Amazon and Kindle and Kindle Unlimited.
Okay. No Audible yet?
No Audible yet. No, that is somewhat in the works.
Okay.
I've had a lot of people ask me about it. So it's out there somewhere, but not yet.
Okay. And if someone wants to have you come on their show or just talk to you, how do they get in contact with you?
Probably the best way to get into contact with me is through email, or even Instagram or Twitter. You can find me on those as well. So
Okay.
I wish I knew what my Twitter and Instagram handles were, but I don't.
I can put them in the show notes. I'll
That
put
would
it in
be
the show notes
good.
for everybody. I'll put all three in there so they can find you.
I am part of that generation that's to the end of social media. I am just barely holding on to the knowledge that I need to be able to do it. You know, I was the no internet as a child generation. So.
We didn't have computers when I was a kid, so don't worry.
Well, I didn't either. So.
Our computer was outside throwing rocks at each other. So.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you for sharing your story and coming on to Misfit Nation, and we look forward to good things from you in the future.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Awesome. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.